President Trump is angry that the Smithsonian is actually trying to teach American history. He's angry because apparently when you walk into the Smithsonian, all you see is how bad slavery was. So it's clear that President Trump doesn't believe that slavery was bad, and it's not something that we should continue to educate future generations of Americans on. We should just gloss over this horrific part of our history where we had in the slaveholding states a slaveocracy based on white supremacy. And to show you this, I'm going to give you an example today of how horrible slavery really was. And not just how horrible the institution was, but how horrible the laws and the judicial opinions that sustained and maintained the system of African slavery in the antebellum slaveocracy truly were. So today we're going to look at a case called Kemp v. Hutchinson. This is in Louisiana in 1853. Now, the plaintiff in this case was an overseer who was not paid by a plantation owner, a slave owner. Defendant is the slave owner. The defendant, the slave owner, refused to pay the plaintiff because he believed the plaintiff was responsible for the death of one of his slaves. Now, the first horrible thing to realize here is that this is a civil case talking about the death of a human being, and the remedy for this civil wrong, the destruction of property, is going to be money. More often than not, and it's not completely exclusive, we do find criminal cases dealing with the abuse of the enslaved, but it's rare. More often than not, you're going to find civil cases where an owner, an enslaver, sues someone who destroyed or damaged their property, being Africans, people of African descent. So in this story, the reason that the slave owner won't pay the plaintiff, won't pay the overseer, is that he alleged that there was the overseer was excessively cruel. And what happened was in late September of 1853, the overseer had the enslaver's slave whipped twice in one day. Now, he had this person whipped, they had her whipped twice in one day because the overseer accused her of stealing. And he threatened to whip her a third time unless she confessed and produced the stolen items. So the enslaved person continually denied that she had stolen anything. She denied that she, had anything. She continued to deny through 2 brutal whippings. And it doesn't need to be said how brutal these whippings actually were. A whipping is a whipping regardless of whether or not the amount of lashes or anything else is explained in the opinion. She was brutally beaten twice, and we'll see how brutal these beatings were because of what happened next. She denied. She then says that she tells the overseer, don't do it again. I will go and produce the stolen items. I'll go get it for you. Instead of going to get any stolen items, because she probably didn't steal anything, she goes down to the nearest body of water, which is a river, and she drowns herself. This is horrific. This is horrific because it now goes in front of the Louisiana Supreme Court, and we have a situation where a enslaved woman was whipped twice, and the whipping was so severe that she decided to end her own life instead of going and facing it a third time. And the reality is here she probably was innocent because, you would assume if she would have produced stolen item, the punishment might have ended, or she might have been afraid either way. She might have actually have stolen something, but realized if she produced it, she was going to be beaten to death. So there's the choice for her was something that we can't even possibly fathom as human beings. No one for thievery, even if she did steal something, deserves to be whipped and beaten because of it. So this just shows you the system, before we even get into what the Louisiana Supreme Court said, the system was so horrific that this woman felt her only choice was to take her own life because the punishments were so severe. Even if she didn't do it, she couldn't go and stand to go through another whipping, another punishment. If she did do it, the fear of being whipped to death was there. So her only option in her mind was to drown herself. Now, the Louisiana Supreme Court said, you didn't give us any details regarding the punishment of the slave except to say that it was a whipping. So it was also proven that the slave's death was her drowning, which was voluntary. She chose to go to the river and drown herself. She chose to do it. Therefore, it was a voluntary act. Her death was not a result of the mistreatment. Her death occurred because of the drowning. Her death did not occur because of the whipping. Louisiana Supreme Court refused to make the correlation between the two. They simply said she didn't die because of the beating, she died because of the drowning, which is a voluntary act. Louisiana Supreme Court made clear that under Louisiana law, the power to correct an enslaved person was inherently delegated to an overseer, and in this case, the overseer was not responsible for her death because her death resulted from the drowning rather than from the punishment. The court didn't look into how severe the punishment was because the court didn't care. And the court did not want to limit, clearly by citing the fact that an overseer has the rights and power of the master. The court didn't want to do anything to limit that inherent power, that absolute power that an overseer, through the authority delegated to him by an enslaver, was given over the enslaved. The court just simply said she didn't die because of the beating, she died because of the drowning. Therefore, the overseer is not liable for the death. They refused. They just flat out ignored causation here. They said the punishment was one thing, the death was another, therefore he's not responsible for the death. So this brings up two really terrifying things about the slavocracy in the antebellum South. One is that the courts often, many times, and you can go watch previous videos, completely overlook the brutality of punishments that enslavers and their overseers and people in their charge meted out against the enslaved. And if they ever even did challenge that the brutality of it, they often always left back doors open to allow those punishments to continue. For example, if a slave refused to submit, if the punishment was considered just, if it wasn't considered extreme and an enslaved person died, then no one was liable because the punishment was not extreme or excessive. What was considered normal punishment? Whippings, beatings, that sort of thing. And what was considered normal was also determined by the juries of the time, which were made up of usually overseers, other workers on plantations, whites who benefited from the system. So that's the first horrific thing, is that the Louisiana Supreme Court completely ignored causation and completely ignored the brutality of these two beatings that drove this poor enslaved woman to drown herself. The second thing was, and I just, my gut tells me that in this case she probably didn't steal anything, but, I can't make that assumption. But either way, it doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter if she stole something. She didn't deserve to be whipped, brutally whipped multiple times. But you see that it didn't matter, because if she didn't do it, she couldn't produce the item, and she was going to be whipped for a third time. So her only way out, her only saving grace in her mind, was to drown herself, to kill herself. If she did steal something, she then had to worry about, if I return with this item, who's to say he's not just going to beat me again, and I can't go through that. So either way, in her rational mind, her only way out was to kill herself. So if Trump really thinks that we shouldn't teach this, we should ignore this part of American history, then there's something incredibly wrong with him. We are trying to gloss over and to whitewash and to erase American history. This is American history. This is what needs to be taught. The horrors of the antebellum slavocracy, the codified white supremacy, the brutality towards people of African descent, all of this is a part of our history that we cannot get rid of. We were founded with this system ensconced, written into the Constitution. And this system of white supremacy, this codified white supremacy, didn't simply end when the 13th Amendment was ratified and ended slavery. So was slavery bad? Yeah, it was horrible. So horrible that many people chose death as opposed to continuing to endure the brutal punishments that existed in the antebellum slavocracy. So as always, thanks for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe, share, and I'll see you for the next one.